Chapter 1 One Sunday afternoon, three third-grade girls, Tange Satoko, Kimura Midori, and Nozaki Sayuri, were walking hand in hand through a quiet neighborhood in Setagaya on their way home from visiting a friend. Suddenly, Satoko stopped abruptly, her eyes widening in shock. Midori and Sayuri, startled by her reaction, quickly followed her gaze. Something strange was happening right in the middle of the road. The heavy iron cover of a manhole in the distance was slowly rising, inch by inch. Was someone inside? The manhole cover was now completely open. From the darkness below, a figure emerged. It was a man dressed in a long, black cloak. He wore a wide-brimmed black hat, large glasses, and had a sharply curled mustache along with a pointed black goatee. He looked like a sinister Western demon. Climbing out of the manhole, the man stood tall, turning to face the girls with a sly grin. Then, with a dramatic flourish of his cloak, like a bat spreading its wings, he began walking away. That man is suspicious. Hey, let's follow him, Midori whispered excitedly. Her older brother, Toshio, was a member of the Boy Detectives Club, and she had inherited his passion for mystery and adventure. Satoko and Sayuri, always eager to go along with Midori's ideas, nodded immediately. The three girls started tailing the man in the black cloak. The man walked across a wide, open field and disappeared into a forest in the distance. The outskirts of Setagaya still had patches of farmland and wooded areas. Since it was daytime, the forest didn't seem too scary. Fueled by curiosity, the girls continued following him. Deep inside the forest stood an old Western-style mansion. Oh, that's the haunted house. How creepy. What should we do? The mansion had once been home to a foreign family, but now it was abandoned. The locals called it the haunted house. Rumors swirled around the eerie place. Some claimed to have seen a red spirit orb floating out of its second-floor windows at night. Others swore they had heard the chilling sound of a woman crying from within its empty halls. Just as the three girls were about to run away, something shocking happened. The man in the black cloak began climbing the outer wall of the mansion, without using a ladder. He slithered upward, just like a snake, until he reached the second-floor window and disappeared inside. The girls shivered in fear and turned to flee, but at that moment, a terrifying scream echoed from the mansion. The sound sent chills down their spines. Instinctively, they turned back toward the house. A pale face peeked out from the second-floor window. The figure screamed again. Though the distance made it hard to see clearly, it appeared to be a girl around the same age as them, with short hair. She was crying out for help, desperate and terrified, as if she was about to be killed. The man in the black cloak must be attacking her. The same thought struck all three of them at once. The girl at the window struggled, trying to escape from someone's grasp. But before she could break free, she was dragged backward, vanishing from sight. The next moment, the crying stopped abruptly. Had the man covered her mouth? Terrified, the three girls bolted from the scene, running as fast as they could. Each of them rushed straight home. Midori, however, wasted no time in telling her father and older brother, Toshio, about what had happened. What a missed opportunity. If I had been there, I would have definitely found some clue. Toshio, the boy detective, clenched his fists in frustration. Midori's father immediately called the police. Officers rushed to the Western-style mansion in the woods and searched the entire place, but found nothing. It was completely abandoned. There wasn't a single trace of it. Chapter 2. The day after, a small girl was seen crying for help from the window of the old Western-style mansion in the forest. Midori's older brother, Toshio Kimura, immediately reported the incident to the leader of the Young Detective Club, Kobayashi. Upon hearing the news, Kobayashi rushed to Kimura's house, and the two of them decided to investigate the Western-style mansion in the forest. Since it was broad daylight, they had nothing to fear. However, both boys came well prepared with their detective gear, flashlights, silk rope ladders, and emergency whistles, just in case. As Kobayashi and Kimura made their way through the dimly lit forest, they finally arrived in front of the so-called haunted mansion. They cautiously pushed against the entrance door, which opened without any resistance. It wasn't even locked. The two boys stepped inside, moving carefully down the wide hallway, making sure not to make a sound. With their flashlights guiding the way, they thoroughly searched both the first and second floors, checking every single room. However, they found nothing. There was no sign of anyone living there. It was completely abandoned. "This room feels strange," Kobayashi murmured as they returned to a large room on the first floor. "I don't know why, but something seems off." Just as he finished speaking, a faint, barely audible voice reached their ears from somewhere in the house. "Uncle, please, have mercy. I'm scared. Someone, help me." It was the voice of a small girl. The two boys froze in place, their faces turning pale as they stared at each other in shock. "It sounded like it came from beneath the floor," Kobayashi whispered, tilting his head in thought. Then, another faint voice. "Oh no, hurry, help me. There must be a hidden door somewhere. But where?" Kobayashi shone his flashlight around the room, searching every inch for a clue. The room contained a large fireplace, and below it, a row of circular decorative carvings lined the bottom. Kobayashi pressed each of them one by one, testing if any of them moved. Then, the seventh one from the right gave way, just like a doorbell button. Kobayashi pressed it firmly. At that moment, a loud clunk echoed through the room. At the same time, Kobayashi spun around in alarm. Kimura had vanished. Rushing over, he found a square hole gaping in the floor. It was a trapdoor leading to a hidden underground chamber. Pressing the fireplace button must have triggered the mechanism. "Kimura, are you okay?" Kobayashi aimed his flashlight down the hole and called out. I'm fine," Kimura's strained voice responded. Shining the flashlight further down, Kobayashi saw a smooth, slide-like plank leading into the darkness below. Without hesitation, he leapt in after his friend. Swoosh! He slid down the slope and landed with a hard thud on the solid underground floor. Groaning, he struggled to his feet and swept the flashlight across the room. It was a spacious underground chamber, about 10 tatami mats in size. But there was no sign of the girl who had screamed for help. On the far wall, a dark tunnel yawned open. "Is there another underground chamber beyond that?" Kimura's voice trembled as he pointed toward the tunnel. The two boys instinctively shone their flashlights in that direction. Then, they saw it. Deep inside the pitch-black tunnel, two gleaming, round objects floated in the air. And they were moving, drawing closer, glowing eyes. Something terrifying, was coming toward them. From the shadows, it slowly emerged. Like a hermit crab peeking out from its shell. The boys instinctively clung to each other. It had a massive, crimson-red body. A long, pointed horn protruded from its head. Beneath the horn, a grotesque, sharp mouth. Its two glowing eyes gleamed ominously. 6 long, spindly legs curled and twitched. And then, it stepped forward, a giant red beetle. The size of a human. What would happen to the two boys? And what had become of the little girl who had cried for help? The answers remained hidden in the darkness. Chapter 3. Kobayashi and Kimura found themselves face to face with a terrifying creature in the basement of the Western-style mansion, a giant red beetle, as big as a human. The two boys stood frozen in the corner of the underground chamber, staring at the monstrous insect. Their flashlights trembled in their hands, the beams of light flickering unsteadily as they illuminated the creature. A sharp, eerie screeching sound echoed through the chamber. Keek, keek, it was the beetle's cry. With every screech, its pointed mouthparts opened and closed in a menacing motion. The enormous red beetle moved its long, 6 legs awkwardly, stepping clumsily across the chamber as it circled around. Then, after pacing back and forth for a while, it began approaching them. Its glistening red shell shimmered ominously under the flashlight beams. Occasionally, it would open its massive wings with a loud whoosh, creating strong gusts of wind that sent dust swirling through the air. It was now only 2 meters away. Its enormous, bulging eyes locked onto them, unblinking. Any moment now, it might pounce. The two boys instinctively braced themselves. Then, the beetle bent its hind legs, steadied itself using its middle legs and rear end, and slowly reared up on its hind legs. Its front legs flailed in the air, reaching out. Its grotesque, writhing belly loomed right before their eyes. It was about to grab them. But then, something astonishing happened. A square-shaped hole suddenly appeared in the beetle's abdomen. A panel flipped open, revealing an opening that led straight into its body. The panel extended downward like a slide, touching the floor. And then, something inside began to move. From the square hole in its abdomen, a smaller red beetle, about 50 centimeters long, crawled out. A medium-sized beetle, emerging from within the giant one. There was no way the giant beetle had just given birth. No. This wasn't a real insect. The giant beetle had to be some kind of mechanical construct, perhaps made of plastic or metal. And the 50-centimeter beetle that had just crawled out, it was mechanical too. The medium-sized beetle slid down the panel-turned ramp and began crawling in circles around the chamber. Meanwhile, the giant beetle suddenly flipped onto its back and lay motionless, like the empty shell of a cicada. It was as if it had shed its skin. The medium-sized beetle finished circling the room and stopped directly in front of the two boys. Then, it reared up on its hind legs, just as the giant beetle had done before. And then, another square-shaped hole opened in its abdomen. This time, a 15-centimeter long beetle crawled out. It was tiny compared to the others, but still several times larger than a real beetle and just as unnervingly red all over. Afterward, the medium-sized beetle flopped onto its back like an empty shell. The 15-centimeter beetle scuttled around the room before stopping in front of the boys. Then, once again, it stood up on its hind legs. And just like before, a small square hole opened in its abdomen. This time, a tiny red beetle, about the same size as a real one, slid out onto the floor. But unlike the others, the smallest beetle didn't move at all. Even as the 15-centimeter beetle flipped over like an empty husk, the tiny one simply lay motionless on the ground. Was it dead? Despite everything, it was astonishingly beautiful. Unlike the giant beetle, which had been terrifying, this small beetle had a deep red color, like a glowing ruby. Its entire body was translucent, shining like a gemstone. And its tiny, sparkling eyes gleamed like diamonds. Just then, Kimura let out a startled cry. Something black had begun crawling out from the tunnel at the far end of the chamber. Then, it rose to its feet. A human figure, a man in a black cloak. His sinister presence was like that of a Western demon. And then, wahahaha, a deep, mocking laugh filled the chamber. Kobayashi, it's been a while, hasn't it? Have you forgotten me already? The cloaked figure smirked. Remember the time we fought over the golden tiger? The battle of wits we had? Kobayashi's eyes widened in shock. It's you. Chapter 4. Kobayashi and Kimura had sneaked into the basement of the haunted mansion. Suddenly, before them appeared a terrifying figure. A man in a black cloak, resembling a Western devil. I am the magician who once tested wits with you members of the Boy Detectives Club. This time, I lured you here to test your intelligence once again. Last time, it was the golden tiger. But this time, it is this red beetle. It is made of ruby, and its two eyes are diamonds, my most treasured possession. I will give it to you. Just like before, you must use your wits to hide it well. Within 5 days, I will find it and steal it. If I succeed, you lose this contest of wits. Hearing this, the two boys finally relaxed. So you're that magician from before. However, there were still some things they didn't understand. Was it you who climbed the outside of this Western-style house yesterday, even though there was no ladder? And what about the girl who was peeking from the window? Were you tormenting her? Ha ha ha, that was all part of my plan to lure you here. I knew Kimura's younger sister, Midori, and her friends were watching, so I performed a little mystery for them. At that time, a thin but strong rope ladder was hanging from the roof of the house. I used it to climb up. Since it was evening, the thread was invisible from a distance. As for the girl you saw, that was a doll. Look at this. The magician pulled out a large doll from beneath his cloak. But yesterday, people heard the girl crying out in a sad voice. When Kobayashi asked this, the magician grinned and turned his head to the side. Ah, help me! A terrifying girl's scream rang out. The two boys jumped in shock, staring at the doll's face, but its mouth wasn't moving at all. Ha ha ha, that was ventriloquism. I imitated a girl's voice without moving my lips. The screams you heard yesterday. It was just that. Hearing this explanation, the two finally felt at ease. They accepted the ruby beetle from the magician and left the haunted mansion. Returning to Kobayashi's home, they told his parents and Midori everything. Then, the two of them hurried to the Akechi Detective Agency to report the magician's challenge. Before long, the 10 members of the Boy Detectives Club, whom Kobayashi had summoned by telephone, gathered at the agency. Among them was one girl, a new member who had joined recently. She was Miyata Yuko, a first-year middle school student, and the only female member of the club. Though young, she was tall for her age and had an adorable appearance. I have an idea. We should hide the beetle at my house, Yuko suddenly suggested. She leaned close to whisper something into Captain Kobayashi's ear. One by one, the others listened, and as they grasped her plan, they clapped their hands in excitement. That's brilliant. That's the best idea. Yuko carefully placed the ruby beetle in her pocket, pressing her hand firmly over it. Then, escorted by the boys, she returned home. Yuko's family business involved making plaster figurines, and behind their house was a small workshop. Yuko entered the workshop. Inside, countless plaster figures were lined up. Statues of boys' heads, goddesses, and girls carrying flower baskets. Some figures were already completed, while others still needed assembly. Could Yuko be planning to hide the beetle inside one of these plaster statues? Would that really fool the magician? Or was there a deeper plan behind her idea? As Yuko crouched among the plaster figures, a terrifying face appeared outside the glass window. A filthy man, his entire face covered in a thick beard, was peering inside. Who was this bearded man? And what exactly was Yuko's clever plan that had made the boys so excited? Before long, something truly bizarre would unfold. The bearded stranger, his identity unknown, was about to do something utterly shocking. Ha ha ha, once again, you have all fallen right into my trap. Chapter 5. Miyata Yuko, the only female member of the Boy Detectives Club, entered her family's plaster workshop with the ruby red beetle, busy with some secret task. But outside the window, a filthy man, his face covered in a thick beard, was quietly watching her. The next evening, strange things began happening one after another in Yuko's neighborhood in Shibuya. At a frame shop in town, a scruffy-haired man walked in and bought a plaster bust of a young boy, around 5 or 6 years old, which was displayed in the shop window. However, after leaving the store, the man stepped into a deserted alley, looked around cautiously, unwrapped the package, and suddenly smashed the plaster bust onto the ground, shattering it to pieces. Why would he destroy something he had just bought? Had he gone mad? 30 minutes later, the same man appeared at an art dealer's shop in another part of town. Again, he bought a plaster bust of the same young boy. Then, just as before, he went into a deserted alley and smashed it into tiny fragments. Another 30 minutes passed. This time, the man sneaked into a mansion in the same district. Inside the reception room of the house stood another identical plaster bust. The man climbed through a window, stole the bust, and carried it to a nearby shrine's forest, where he once again shattered it into pieces. Damn it, it's not here. Those were the only 3 unfinished busts at the time. The man stood frozen in frustration. Just then, a girl's laughter rang out from behind him. Startled, the man spun around. Stepping out from behind a large tree was Yuko. You were tricked, mister. This battle of wits belongs to the Boy Detectives Club. She grinned mischievously. You saw me hiding the Red Beetle inside a plaster statue, didn't you? But that was just an act to fool you. The real hiding place is somewhere else entirely. Yuko giggled playfully. So, you got me, huh? I wanted to steal it, but there were always people in the workshop. So, I had no choice but to wait for those 3 busts to be delivered and then go around destroying them one by one. But in the end, I got nothing. You outwitted me. Wahaha. Surprisingly, the man didn't seem angry. He simply burst into laughter. But then, his expression suddenly turned serious. However, young lady, the magician is even smarter than you. The man smirked. I'm just the magician's apprentice. My job was to keep you distracted and lead you on a wild chase. While you were busy following me, the magician himself stole the Red Beetle from its hiding place. Ha 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 ha. Hearing this, Yuko gasped, her face turning pale. Without a word, she suddenly bolted off in a panic. The man watched her run and chuckled slyly. Yuko took a bus home, grabbed a small shovel, and rushed to the empty field behind her house. She pushed through the tall grass, reaching the center of the field. There, she removed a marked stone and quickly dug beneath it. From the hole, she pulled out a tin can. Oh, thank goodness. He was lying. Inside the can was the Red Beetle. Safe and sound. Oof. This time, you were the one who got tricked. A voice spoke suddenly from behind her. Yuko spun around in shock. The same bearded man was standing there, smirking. The story about the magician stealing it? That was a lie. The truth is, I am the magician. I only said that to lure you to the real hiding place. His hand shot out toward her. Now, hand over the beetle. Chapter 6. Yuko had been completely fooled by the magician. He had discovered the hiding place of the Red Beetle. It was an empty, desolate field, and she was just a child, while the magician was a full-grown man. There was nothing she could do to stop him. In the end, he took the ruby beetle from her. Now it's your turn to search, the magician said. I will hide this beetle in a mysterious place. Let's see if you can find it. He chuckled. Poor thing, you look like you're about to cry. Well, don't worry. I'll make sure to give you a hint. Just wait and see. With that, the magician turned and disappeared. 3 days later, around noon, Yuko was playing in her garden when a red balloon floated down from the sky. She assumed that some child must have let go of its string, allowing it to rise into the air before it slowly lost its strength and began to descend. As Yuko watched the balloon, it drifted downward until it finally landed right in front of her on the ground. A string was attached to the balloon, and at the end of the string, something white was tied. Curious, Yuko picked it up and examined it. It was a piece of paper, neatly folded into a small square. When she carefully unfolded it, she found a strange message written inside. May 25th, 3:20 p.m. Enter from the top of the lone cedar. Beware of the terrifying guardian. The magician. A letter from the magician. Yuko's heart began to race. Had the magician really kept his promise and sent her a clue about the beetle's hiding place? Wasting no time, she grabbed the paper and hurried to the train station. She rode straight to the Akechi Detective Agency in Kojimachi to consult with Kobayashi, the leader of the Boy Detectives Club. May 25th. That's the day after tomorrow, Kobayashi said, reading the letter. So we have to go to this lone cedar on that day. I think I've heard of that tree before. Oh, that's right. Near Kimura Toshio's house, past the haunted mansion of the magician, there's a huge cedar tree that people call the lone cedar. Let's call Kimura and ask. Kobayashi picked up the phone, and sure enough, Kimura confirmed that there was indeed a large cedar tree by that name in his neighborhood. On May 25th, at exactly 3 p.m., 5 members of the Boy Detectives Club gathered in the open field where the lone cedar stood. The 5 were Kobayashi, Yuko, Kimura Tashio, Inoue Ichiro, the strongest member of the club, and Noro Ippei, nicknamed Noro-chan. Noro-chan was timid but incredibly quick and observant. What does "enter from the top of the lone cedar" mean? Kobayashi wondered, tilting his head in confusion. Noro-chan suddenly spoke up in his usual high-pitched voice. There must be a hole at the top of the tree. We have to climb up and go inside. I can try climbing it. As he spoke, he began untying the long rope wrapped around his waist. Noro-chan was an expert tree climber. He had suspected they might need to climb a tree today, so he had come prepared. He was also skilled at rope throwing. Twirling the long rope in circles, he expertly tossed it up, looping it around one of the high branches of the cedar. Then, he tied one end of the rope around himself and handed the other end to the rest of the group. "Pull me up," he called out. The team worked together, pulling the rope like a game of tug-of-war. Using their strength for support, Noro-chan began scaling the thick cedar trunk with ease. Once he reached the lower branches, he continued his climb, moving from branch to branch. Finally, he reached the very top of the tree. For a while, he searched the area, scanning the treetop. "I don't see anything. There's no hole up here," his voice echoed from above. What was going on? The letter clearly said to enter from the top of the lone cedar. But if there was no hole, then how could they possibly enter? Noro-chan remained perched at the top for about 5 minutes, motionless, deep in thought. Then, suddenly, his voice rang out in excitement. "I got it. Look over there." He pointed in the direction of the open field. The others followed his gaze. There, stretched out on the ground, was the long, dark shadow of the lone cedar, cast by the bright afternoon sun. What had Noro-chan realized? What secret lay hidden in the shadow of the lone cedar? Chapter 7. Now, it was the boy detective's turn to search for the ruby beetle. The letter from the magician read: May 25th, 3:20 p.m. Enter from the top of the lone cedar. Beware of the terrifying guardian. Following these instructions, 5 members of the group, Kobayashi, Yuko, Kimura, Inoue, and Noro-chan, arrived at the open field in Setagaya, where the lone cedar stood. Noro-chan, the best tree climber in the group, scaled the towering cedar tree. However, he found no hole or entrance at the top. As he scanned the area from above, something caught his attention. He suddenly pointed at the long shadow of the tree stretching across the field and shouted, "Over there, that's the entrance." Hearing this, Kobayashi's eyes widened in realization. Of course, the top in the message wasn't referring to the actual tree. It meant the tip of its shadow. Once Noro-chan climbed back down, the group followed the cedar's shadow to its farthest point. The area was covered in tall grass. Kobayashi waded through it, searching carefully. Before long, he called out, "I found a cave. This must be the entrance." The opening was narrow, only about 60 centimeters across. Shining their flashlights inside, they saw nothing but darkness. Inoue and Kimura turned on their flashlights, and Inoue, being the strongest, went in first. The narrow passage only extended for about 3 meters before widening into a larger space. A stone staircase led downward, allowing them to stand upright. Descending the steps, they reached a massive iron door, shut tightly. They all recalled the magician's warning. Beware of the terrifying guardian. Their hearts pounded. Whatever was behind this door was surely the guardian they had been warned about. Still, they had come too far to turn back now. Inoue reached for the handle and gave it a push. The heavy door groaned loudly as it swung open. Shining their flashlights ahead, they found nothing, just an empty cave stretching into the darkness. Cautiously, the 5 of them stepped forward, with Inoue leading the way. Noro-chan, trembling with fear, clung to Kobayashi. Yuko, being the only girl, needed protection as well. Kobayashi held both their hands as they carefully moved forward. After walking a little further, they reached a bend in the tunnel. As they turned the corner, they froze in terror. Right before them, crouched in the darkness, was an enormous monster. Its face was yellow, with thick black stripes. Its massive eyes, each the size of a wash basin, gleamed ominously in the dim light. A mouth lined with thick, whisker-like tendrils stretched across its face, with 2 long white fangs protruding outward. It was a beast like a tiger, only 100 times larger. Its massive head filled the entire tunnel, and its enormous jaw rested against the ground. A foul-smelling wind blew through the cave. Then, in a deep, rumbling voice, the monster spoke. "Ho ho ho, what do we have here? Some tasty little children. What a delicious feast. I'll eat you all right now. Ho 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 ho." Its sinister laughter echoed through the cavern, sending chills down their spines. Then, the beast opened its gigantic mouth, nearly 2 meters wide. The 5 of them tried to flee, but it was as if they were being pulled forward by an invisible force, like iron drawn to a magnet. They couldn't move away. Before they knew it, they were being dragged helplessly toward the monster's open mouth. And one by one, they were swallowed whole. Inside the beast's mouth, a massive red tongue writhed beneath them. They tumbled onto its slippery surface, barely conscious. But what was this terrifying creature? Why did such a monstrous being exist in the depths of the earth? And now that they had been swallowed, what would become of them? Chapter 8. Kobayashi, Kimura, Yuko, Inoue, and Noro-chan entered the mysterious cave in the desolate field of Setagaya, determined to retrieve the ruby beetle. Inside the cave, they encountered a monstrous tiger, 100 times the size of a normal one, which swallowed them whole with its enormous mouth. When they regained consciousness, they realized they were still lying on the tiger's tongue. Strangely, they were not being swallowed into its stomach. Inoue, still holding tightly to his flashlight, shone it deep into the tiger's throat. To their astonishment, there was no esophagus, no stomach, nothing at all. The tiger was just a head. And it wasn't a living creature. It was a mechanical construct. The force that had pulled them in was likely a large fan hidden somewhere behind, creating a powerful suction. Inoue attempted to climb out of the tiger's mouth, but the jaws had already shut tight. No matter how hard he pushed, they wouldn't budge. Seeing no other option, he consulted with Kobayashi, and they decided to move forward into the tiger's throat. Beyond the tiger's mouth, the passage remained a concrete tunnel. They proceeded cautiously, shining their flashlights ahead. Then, they reached a dead end. "Look, there's a door here." It was a small door, just big enough for one person to pass through. Inoue grabbed the handle and pulled. It opened easily. The door was incredibly thick and sturdy, like a vault door, made of solid iron. The 5 of them stepped inside. Then, to their shock, the heavy iron door silently swung shut behind them, on its own. Alarmed, Inoue immediately turned to reopen it. But this time, no matter how hard he pushed, it wouldn't move an inch. The inside of the door was smooth, featureless iron. There was no handle, no latch. Nothing. Oh no, this place has no exit at all. The room was small, about the size of 2 tatami mats. A perfectly round chamber, like the bottom of a deep well. They were trapped inside a concrete cylinder. Shining their flashlights upwards, they saw that the chamber extended far above them. just like a well. Suddenly, "What's that sound?" Noro-chan whimpered. A low, mechanical humming echoed in the distance, like the sound of a motor starting up. Then, this is bad," Inoue shouted, his voice trembling. Everyone turned their eyes upward. Something terrifying was happening. A thick, iron lid was slowly descending from the top of the chamber, perfectly round, fitting seamlessly into the walls. It was coming down, steadily, unstoppably. The heavy lid was controlled by a motor, lowering with terrifying precision. It was already close enough to reach with their hands. "If we don't stop it, we'll be crushed to death," Kobayashi shouted, immediately raising his arms. The others followed suit, pressing their hands against the descending lid, trying desperately to push it back. But it was useless. The iron lid was far too heavy. Slowly, steadily, it continued to descend. Their arms weakened under the immense weight, and their hands were forced lower and lower. The lid was now touching their heads. They crouched down. Then, they had no choice but to sit. Still, the iron lid kept coming down. They could no longer even sit upright. They lay on their backs, using both hands and feet to resist the crushing weight. But it was hopeless. The immense slab of iron, weighing hundreds of kilograms, was now just centimeters from their faces. Yuko burst into tears. Noro-chan started crying too. "Somebody, help us!" Inoue and Kimura cried out in despair. Even Kobayashi, always the leader, felt tears welling in his eyes. Would this be the end? What was going to happen to them? Chapter 9. Kobayashi, the leader of the boy detectives, along with members Kimura, Yuko, Inoue, and Noro-chan, deciphered the magic doctor's code and entered a cave in a lonely field on the outskirts of Setagaya. Once inside, they found themselves trapped in a round concrete chamber. Above them, a massive iron lid was slowly descending. There were no gaps in the lid. If it continued to lower, they would all be crushed. It was certain death. Terrified, Noro-chan and Yuko burst into tears. But Kobayashi remained calm. Thinking as fast as he could, he desperately searched for a way to save everyone. "The magic doctor wouldn't actually kill us. He's testing our courage and intelligence by putting us in this dangerous situation. If that were true, then there had to be an escape route hidden somewhere." Holding his flashlight, Kobayashi crawled around the chamber, inspecting the concrete walls. Then, he found it. A rectangular outline, about 60 centimeters square, was etched into the wall. This might be a secret escape door. He pushed on it with all his strength. It didn't budge. There must be a mechanism to open it. Kobayashi quickly scanned the surrounding area. A short distance above the rectangular outline, he noticed a small bump protruding from the wall. Upon closer inspection, he realized it wasn't part of the concrete. It was metal, painted to blend in. "I see. The iron lid is meant to descend all the way, which would crush us. But before that happens, there's a way for us to escape. When the iron lid presses against this protrusion, it must trigger the hidden door to open." The realization struck him in an instant. "If that's the case, maybe we can open it manually." Pressing his thumb against the protrusion, he placed his other hand over it for extra force and pushed with all his might. It wouldn't move. It required tremendous strength. Sweat poured from Kobayashi's body. Still, he didn't give up. He kept pushing. Harder and harder. Until finally. Clank. With a sharp metallic sound, the rectangular outline slid open. Kobayashi had done it. His intelligence and courage had saved them. Beyond the opening lay a pitch-black tunnel, barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Without hesitation, he called for everyone to follow. It was unsettling, but staying meant certain death under the iron lid. There was no choice but to escape through the tunnel. The cramped, dark passage stretched for 10 meters. Then, suddenly, the space opened up. Had they reached the outside? No, it was still pitch dark. They were in another underground room. Standing up, they shone their flashlights around. It was a vast chamber, at least 20 tatami mats in size. Just as they stepped inside, a chilling voice echoed from nowhere. Ha ha ha, impressive, you escaped in the nick of time. But this isn't over yet. My letter warned you to beware of the terrifying guardians, didn't it? The first was the great tiger. The second was the iron lid. Now, what do you think the third one will be? The final guardian is always the most terrifying. Be careful, it was the magic doctor's voice. But from where? They couldn't tell. Most likely, a speaker was hidden in the ceiling. The 5 of them huddled together, clinging to each other. Noro-chan was trembling so hard they could feel it. Then, wait, what is that? Kimura gasped, pointing at the far end of the chamber. Their flashlight beams swung in that direction. Something was happening, something eerie, from beneath the floor. Something was rising. A round shape emerged. A head? It grew larger, rapidly. There was no hole in the concrete floor, yet the figure kept rising. It reached the size of a child. Then an adult. Then twice the size of an adult. 3 times. It was massive. A featureless giant. Its head was enormous. Its body was ghostly blue. A towering, faceless monster. And it was still growing. Chapter 10. Kobayashi, Kimura, Yuko, Inoue, and Noro-chan had entered the underground lair of the magic doctor to retrieve the ruby beetle, but they had encountered many terrifying dangers along the way. In one of the large underground chambers, something strange began to appear before them. It was an odd creature, shaped like an egg with eyes and a mouth. Before their eyes, it swelled and grew, becoming 3 times the size of an adult, transforming into a monstrous giant. Then, wahahahaha, a thunderous laugh echoed through the chamber. The 5 children instinctively turned and ran back toward the entrance. But when they glanced back, the creature had vanished. There was no trace of it. Not even a shadow. They shone their flashlights around the empty chamber. Nothing. The walls were solid concrete. There were no other exits. The eerie silence made them shiver. That's strange, it disappeared like smoke. Noro-chan muttered in a high-pitched voice. Then, look, something's moving. Once again, something eerie emerged from the floor. A blue figure began rising from the ground. Its face, shoulders, chest, and waist took shape, growing until it reached the size of an adult. Ah, the bronze demon, Kobayashi gasped. It looked exactly like the terrifying foe the boy detectives had battled before, the bronze demon. Its body gleamed blue, like polished metal. Its mouth stretched all the way to its ears, twisted into a grinning sneer. And it kept growing. Soon, it was 3 times the height of an adult. Its head pressed against the ceiling. Grr, grr, a grinding sound echoed through the chamber. Was it gears turning inside the bronze demon's body? Wahahaha, welcome, little brats. I've been expecting you. The red beetle you've been searching for? Oh, I have it right here. The giant blue monster spoke in a terrifying voice. Then, it opened its massive mouth, stretched into a crescent-shaped abyss. From its dark throat, a long red tongue slithered out. And there, sitting on top, was the bright red ruby beetle. The bronze demon had hidden it inside its mouth. Seeing this, the 5 children gasped. Ah, but How could they possibly retrieve it? This gigantic monster was far too powerful. Wahahaha, don't you want this? What pathetic little cowards. If you're brave enough, why don't you climb up my face and take it from my mouth? Wahahaha, do you have the courage to try? The bronze demon rocked its massive body, mocking them with laughter. Damn it, let's go, everyone. Inoue Ichiro, who had learned kendo from his father, shouted and suddenly leapt onto the demon's right leg. But the demon was 3 times the size of an adult. It was like a baby clinging to a sumo wrestler's leg. Then a tremendous rumbling filled the chamber. Rumble, crash. Suddenly, blinding light flooded the room. It was so bright that their eyes, accustomed to the dark, couldn't handle it. For a moment, they were blinded. What's happening? When their vision finally adjusted, they gasped in shock. The ceiling was gone. It had split open mechanically, revealing the sky above. The sun's rays shone brightly into the underground chamber. Ah, look, Inoue-kun is. Kobayashi shouted in alarm. Something incredible was happening. The bronze demon's massive body was floating into the air. It was rising, slowly but steadily. And Inoue, still clinging to its leg, was being lifted along with it. Was this another one of the magic doctor's tricks? What would happen next? None of them knew. But one thing was certain. Something even stranger was about to begin. Chapter 11. The ceiling of the underground chamber opened wide, and the massive bronze giant, 3 times the size of an adult, floated weightlessly into the air, rising toward the sky. Clinging to the giant's leg, Ichiro Inoue was lifted up along with it. Hey, Inoue, let go, jump down. From below, Kobayashi shouted at the top of his lungs. The giant's feet were already 3 meters above the floor. Inoue took a deep breath, let go, and jumped. He landed hard on the concrete floor, falling onto his backside, wincing in pain. He flew away with the red rhinoceros beetle still in his mouth. We have to chase him. Right, the rope ladder, Kobayashi shouted, pulling out a strong silk rope ladder wrapped around his waist under his shirt. He skillfully unraveled it and threw the metal hook attached to one end up toward the open ceiling. After several failed attempts, the hook finally caught onto the edge of the opening. The boy detective's rope ladder was a single silk rope with large knots tied at intervals of 30 centimeters, allowing them to hook their toes into the knots and climb up. I'll go first. Follow me. With that, Kobayashi began to climb swiftly. One by one, the others followed. Since Yuko was a girl, Inoue and the others reached down and pulled her up. Once they emerged from the hole, they found themselves in a grassy field. Kobayashi, who had climbed up first, was already running off into the distance. Where was he going? Looking up at the sky, they saw the bronze giant floating higher and higher like a balloon. Wow, it's really flying. It's already so small, Noro exclaimed in astonishment. Later, they learned the truth. The bronze giant was actually made of thick vinyl, filled with a light gas. In other words, it was nothing more than a giant balloon. A small hole had been hidden in the floor of the underground chamber, leading to another tiny room below. Dr. Magic had been hiding there, pushing the vinyl giant up through the hole while pumping gas into it. As the gas filled it, the vinyl giant expanded, eventually reaching the size of a towering 3-meter colossus. The voice of the bronze giant had been Dr. Magic's all along, speaking from beneath the floor through a voice-changing device. The giant's mouth had a thin string attached to its jaw. By pulling it from below, the mouth would open. When released, it would close. The red rhinoceros beetle had been tied to its tongue. As for the strange egg-like creature that appeared before the giant, it too was made of vinyl. Gas had been pumped into it, inflating it momentarily. While the children had fled in fear, the gas had been rapidly released. causing the vinyl to collapse and disappear back into the hole beneath the floor. Due to the darkness of the underground chamber, Kobayashi and the others hadn't noticed the hidden mechanism. The bronze giant, still clutching the red rhinoceros beetle in its mouth, continued to drift eastward, carried by the wind. "It's gone. I can't see it anymore," Kimura shouted. At that moment, they saw Kobayashi running back from the other side of the field. "Kobayashi, where did you go? That thing flew up into the sky with the red beetle, and now it's completely out of sight," Inoue called out. Catching his breath, Kobayashi ran up to them and answered excitedly. "I called Akechi-sensei. When I told him about the bronze giant, he immediately contacted the newspaper office and then rushed off somewhere in his car. And now, any minute, our allies will arrive from the sky." Kobayashi pointed toward the city skyline of Tokyo. What could possibly be coming from the sky? They waited for over 30 minutes. The sun was beginning to set when a small black dot appeared in the distant sky. "There it is. It's coming," Kobayashi said excitedly. The black dot grew larger and larger as it approached. It was a helicopter. Yes. The allies of the boy detectives had arrived. Chapter 12. The helicopter that had come to aid the boy detectives landed in the middle of the field, stirring up strong winds. "Ah, it's Akechi-sensei," Kobayashi shouted and ran toward the aircraft. The transparent cockpit door of the helicopter opened, and Detective Akechi stepped out. The brilliant detective was capable of piloting both airplanes and helicopters. As soon as Akechi received Kobayashi's phone call, he quickly coordinated with the newspaper company and personally flew their helicopter to the scene. The children gathered around him, each eagerly recounting the terrifying events they had faced in the underground chamber. "All right, then, we'll chase after the bronze demon with this helicopter," Detective Akechi gave his instructions. "Kobayashi and Inoue, you two come with me. There's no room for anyone else. The rest of you, return home and wait. I promise, we will capture the bronze demon and retrieve the red rhinoceros beetle." Akechi, along with Kobayashi and Inoue, climbed into the helicopter. The aircraft once again stirred up fierce winds as it lifted off. Noro, Kimura, and Yuko, who remained in the field, waved their hands, watching them disappear into the sky. For Kobayashi and Inoue, it was their first time riding in a helicopter. It felt as if they were embarking on a journey into space. The helicopter soared high, heading east, in the same direction the bronze demon had drifted away. When they looked back, the western sky was glowing red with the setting sun. Soon, night would fall. The cockpit was equipped with a small searchlight for such an occasion. Since the bronze demon had been carried away by the wind, all they had to do was follow its direction. Unlike the floating demon, they had the power of the propellers on their side. Surely, they would catch up. Before long, the twilight vanished, and the surroundings grew darker. The sky filled with countless twinkling stars, while below them, the lights of rural towns flickered like stars on the ground. Stars above, stars below, it truly felt like a space voyage. "Ah, sensei, there's something flying over there." At Kobayashi's cry, Akechi quickly turned on the searchlight. In the far distance, something dark and shadowy floated gently in the air. The helicopter changed course toward it. Yes, it's shaped like a human. That must be the bronze demon. Before long, the object entered the searchlight's beam. Indeed, it was the balloon of the bronze demon. "Kobayashi, use this to shoot it down. We'll soon be flying right beside it. When I give the signal, open the door slightly, extend your arm, and fire." Handing over a pistol, Akechi gave his instructions. Since Kobayashi was his assistant, he already knew how to use a firearm. Skillfully piloting the helicopter, Akechi maneuvered it right alongside the floating demon, slowing down to match its speed. Following his instructions, Kobayashi slipped his hand through the gap in the door and fired at the demon's body. The bronze demon, which had been floating effortlessly before them, suddenly lurched. The bullet had struck its target. Bang! Bang! 2 more shots rang out. Each time, the giant balloon trembled. Then, a hissing sound. Gas was escaping through the bullet holes. Good. Now, we'll use the helicopter to pin it down. Akechi maneuvered the aircraft in front of the demon and gradually descended. The force of the descent pushed the demon over, pressing it against the bottom of the helicopter. Alright, let's land in a field somewhere. There's no way it can escape now. Aiming the searchlight downward, they located a suitable spot and gradually brought the helicopter down. Finally, they landed in the middle of a dark field. The 3 of them jumped out, shining their flashlights under the aircraft. The vinyl balloon of the bronze demon had deflated completely, lying there like a crumpled mass. They pulled it out and inspected the inside of its mouth. There, on its tongue, still firmly attached, was the red ruby rhinoceros beetle. They had finally retrieved it. The next day, a phone call came to Kobayashi at Akechi's detective agency. It was from Dr. Magic. You win. The ruby is yours. I apologize for all the trouble I caused you. But you see, this was all a test of your intelligence and bravery. Congratulations, boy detectives. Send my regards to Akechi-sensei. After hanging up, Kobayashi turned to Akechi, who had been listening beside him. They exchanged glances and smiled.